You're right, folks, and welcome back. It has been a few weeks. Sorry about that. As I said, in a quick update I posted recently, technical difficulties at its finest, and near enough everything I had planned for this month has just gone poof. Well, near enough everything. I managed to recover some footage, which for this video proved to be a very lucky thing. So, on to Season of Discovery then. At the time of recording, I have 3 level 25s, a priest, hunter, and a druid. I've done the new raid, a fair handful, and gotten exactly zilch in the loot department, so nothing there. And I've generally just spent a good number of hours in this new and arguably improved version of Classic WoW. And if you know anything about my channel and me, you'll know I'm a very big advocate of Classic Plus, and at a glance, this is very much the first step in that direction. Now, obviously, this can't be a complete and conclusive overview of this version of the game. We only have 25 levels, and in January, we will get our next bracket, which is 40, along with a new Gnomeregan raid, and according to the roadmap, we'll then get the 50 bracket some months after that, just before the Kiata pre-patch, and then 60 and post-60 content over the summer and autumn of 2024. So there is a fair way to go before anyone can conclusively say if this was a good thing or not, but I think there is enough here where we can reasonably judge the concept and what we may get going forward. So, let's start with the big thing first. Runes. How do they handle in Season of Discovery? Quite well, as it turns out. Possibly a bit too well in some cases, and for a lot of specs and classes, they do what myself and others have said Classic Plus should do, and that is tweak classes and specs to be viable in a situation where they might otherwise not be. And yeah, it does that, but it also makes others ridiculously powerful. Of course, everything might level out by 60, but Jesus, Priest, for example, get Penance as their first rune, and at least for leveling, it's a little bit mental. Again, it may not be as strong as we go on, but what might have been a slower start for questing and what have you, turned into some sort of insane murder fest because it is impossibly powerful at this level. It one-shot near enough everything up to level 15, and even when it wasn't, it was doing the majority of the heavy lifting. And if it wasn't simply deleting things from this plane of existence, it would heal you in like a tick or two. So yeah, dying as a priest or anyone within a 10-mile radius of a priest was a weirdly hard thing to do. And that does seem to be the case for quite a lot of early runes for a few classes. Druid, for example, they get Fury of Storm Rage, which completely removes the mana cost of Wrath and has like a 12% chance to trigger an instant cast healing touch, which, I'm sorry, what? That is mental for leveling. Like, how that is insane. I mean, it was good, but it was insane. And because of that, at least the classes I played, moment to moment, their gameplay was so much more satisfying than it was previously, but it does have some drawbacks because the threat of the open world has just been greatly diminished. Of course, I've only leveled those 3 classes, so I can't conclusively speak for all of them, but Hunter, for example, is a class I know very well and have played throughout every stage of its development, from vanilla all the way up to Dragonflight, and frankly, I feel like a god at the moment in Season of Discovery, at least in the open world, because even though Hunter has always been strong on its own, it's a really good solo class, yeah, you stick the Beast Mastery rune on your gloves and your pet becomes some sort of roided up monster and does all the work for you, so you're just there flinging arrows at the back, but you're not really even needed. And in fairness, it was also one of the strongest performing classes out of the gate and has been rightly nerfed. But even with that, having Explosive Shot, Chimera Shot, and this Beast Mastery rune, oh my god, they are mental. And whilst I have yet to try it, there are even some runes that allow for melee hunters. I've seen 1 or 2 around, not entirely sure how they perform, but it is kind of cool seeing that sort of thing crop up here and there, which is very much the way talent builds did back in the olden days, so that is pretty cool. But even with runes working fairly well, I do still have some concerns with them as an entity going forward. Now, we know we'll unlock new slots for runes as we go into the next bracket and beyond, and assuming we only get new runes for those new slots, this is a completely moot point. but certainly for some specs and classes, there are runes they have now that will never not be best in slot. So developing runes for those slots and for those specs is going to be a complete waste of time because they will never see the light of day. What do I mean by this? Well, let's take a look at two of the new tanks, Shaman and Warlocks. Shaman tanks will never not be using Way of Earth. It's the rune that makes them viable. It gives them the threat and the defensive attributes they need. It's their defensive stance, their bear form. You're not going to change that. You might get away with not having Shield Mastery if there's another rune that can help them reliably regenerate mana later on, but realistically, you're going to have that as well. And Warlocks, Metamorphosis. Obviously, this one interacts with other runes to, make itself better, but there is no rune in the glove slot that is ever going to be good enough to make a lock tank drop Metamorphosis in favor of it. So if Blizzard want to make new and interesting runes for those slots, they better be broken as all hell to get people to swap away from what are essentially baseline spells at this point. If no new runes are made for the current slots, as I say, this won't be an issue, but if they are, and if they are especially designed for these new shiny tanking and healing specs and what have you, then they have got to be mind-blowing, otherwise they will just be dead on arrival. It's as simple as that. And the last thing I want to mention for runes, the acquisition. Now, not every rune can have a grand quest chain which will have you trek to the farthest corners of the world. That is a bit silly, but some classes do have it easier than others. So again, Priest. Priest require different unique buffs in order to use their runes, and the amount needed can vary. So the early ones need only one buff, which you will get doing your first rune quest, and you can get again by praying in a location relevant to the race of the priest you're playing, as it will differ for each. I think the only two that share a buff are Dwarf and Human. Everyone else has their own bit of racial flavour. And to get the buff of another race, you need to go do a prayer dance with a priest of that race who has the buff, or another priest who has already gotten that buff themselves. Now, these buffs persist through death and have a 4-hour duration, so they're pretty sturdy. But if you, for example, find yourself out and about and the buffs drop off, but you get a rune, you then have to go to your local village hall for a prayer meeting before you can even use it. Druid, Shaman, they get idols that they can just put in their idol slot. They're told to do usually pretty arbitrary things, heal 10 pets or kill 6 mobs with lightning bolts, so on and so forth, and then the rune becomes available. Not that bad, but just an extra step. Then there's Hunter, and actually I believe Warrior. They just get the rune. They kill the mob, loot the chest, do the quest, whatever they need to do, and they just get it. No buff or extracurricular activity required. It's a lot less annoying, frankly, and unlike Druid, Shaman and others, I don't think Hunter runes have a level requirement outside of needing a certain ability, for example. The Beast Mastery rune, you need to trap a cheetah and then kill it. So obviously you need a trap, and the first one of those you get, I think, is at level 16. However, as I was recording this, a guildie popped up on Discord and asked if I wanted to see if we could get his fresh Hunter ult some of the higher runes. So I took my Hunter along, and what do you know? We got a level 9 Hunter some runes that he had no right having. But some runes, like the rune for Savage Roar, which I got at level 13 on my Druid, had a hard level 20 requirement before I could even put in the work to get it. Now, that is partly down to it needing bleed effects, which you won't get before level 20. So yeah, it would be kind of pointless otherwise, but it does still feel like the runes were not equally designed in terms of acquisition, which when you start playing different classes does become quite noticeable because certain classes just need to jump through arbitrary hoop after arbitrary hoop, whilst others just have to press a button. I appreciate class flavour, but it should be used to enhance the experience and not make things feel like they are dragging on. And at the very least, as far as Priest is concerned, that's kind of what I feel like. If I do get caught unawares, then I have to go and hunt for another Priest in order to get my buffs back so I can even use the abilities I've been given, whereas my Hunter has no such issue. I just get the rune I want and then crack on. On to Ashenvale then, and this weird pseudo-warfront thing they have going on. Honestly, I don't know what the point of this is. It's not World PvP. Well, it might be if you're on a PvP server, but I highly doubt it, and I play on Wild Growth EU, the de facto PvE server, and it's just to fill the bars of the boss event with the occasional rogue sat on the periphery trying to pick off a straggler or two. And I know Blizzard want to try and capture some of the magic of the 2019 Classic Beta. It's the reason we're getting brackets. That's how the beta worked. But one thing Blizzard never seemed to fully understand is that you cannot force world PvP. World PvP and the kind of world PvP that took place in the beta happened because there was nothing else to do. And in the olden days, it happened because that was the only way to do PvP. There were no battlegrounds. It's how you got your South Shore versus Taran Mill. But the second AV and Warsong Gulch and other more lucrative ways to farm honor came out, it quickly became antiquated. If you want a zone to be the dedicated world PvP area for a bracket or phase or whatever you wish to call it, first step is to get rid of all the useless PvE elements. If you turn it into an open world Alterac Valley boss rush, very few people are actually going to bother PvPing. And that's all I'm seeing in this instance. No one gives a crap about engaging with the enemy faction. They just want to stomp on the bosses as fast as humanly possible, and will quite happily do what they do in AV, just run past one another, and yeah, that's that. That's not world PvP, that's a weird boss stomp thing. And it's really dull. What I would suggest if you really want to make world PvP work, and yeah, this might be a bit hellish on a PvP server, but frankly, everything is hellish on a PvP server, so it wouldn't really be out of place. All you need to do is disable battlegrounds and have a specific zone with increased honor gains for kills in that area, because battlegrounds are always going to be the better way of PvPing. They just are. And by installing weird PvE elements into what should be a PvP experience, you will end up negating the PvP aspect of what you're trying to do, because the PvE thing that gets crammed into this sort of content always ends up being the most efficient way of farming whatever you're farming. So, yes, I don't get why we need this Warfront Lite thing. It's not PvP. You can't force world PvP in a world where we've optimized the nutsack off of every newt in the land. If you want to encourage PvP, encourage the PvP, not the PvE. And I've said PvP and PvE a bit too much, and it's starting to lose all meaning, so I'm going to move on to the raid now. So, Black Fathom Deep's 10-man. Yeah, it's pretty good, and if it's an indication of what they're going to be doing going forward in Omegon and so on, we should be in for a hell of a treat. It's mostly just repurposed bosses that we know and love from the original, but with a few bells and whistles added. You've got the odd callback here and there. For example, the second boss is Gamora, the same turtle that has always been in this instance since day one. However, on his platform now rests the half-eaten corpse of the Threshodon Serikis, the underwater boss you can kill in the 5-man. Now, they didn't need to put that there, but it was cool to see, just a nice nod to the boss that sadly didn't make the cut for the raid. And the bosses themselves aren't really that difficult. They have like 1 or 2 mechanics at best, and they are all very clearly televised. So there should be no reason you fail these mechanics at all, certainly after your first time here. It does kind of feel like Baby's first raid, but for level 25s there's only so much you can do, considering everyone is missing the majority of their spells and talents. With that said, however, there is a slight difficulty curve. Well, it's less of a curve and more of a steep incline. The first 5 bosses should be one-shots. Like, honestly, if you've played this game for more than 2 minutes, or any game before that for that matter, they should just fall down. But the 6th boss, Kelris, is a bastard for the unprepared. He just does a lot of damage, and in his second phase, it is basically a race to the finish. Kill him before he kills you. Now, most groups are aware of this now, and often require the use of world buffs and shadow prot potions. You don't need these things. He is killable without, if your healers are savvy and DPS are mean, but obviously every little helps. You kill Kelris, and then you will have no issue with Akamai, who is the final boss. He's just a void, old god-infused version of his classic self with your standard breathing abilities that you get with the Hydra boss. And yeah, it's not bad. I'm not blown away, don't get me wrong, but I'm also not writhing in pain because it's a ball breaker. It is just good fun, and sometimes that's enough. Running into BFD with 9 other nutbags and laying waste to Naga and Twilight's Hammer killing an old god-infused Hydra or whatever is a pretty rad experience. And let's be real, not everything needs to hurt, and at this level, a raid shouldn't really be wiping you every boss. But what this does show is that Blizzard understands the basic ethos of classic WoW raiding, which is good. Clear and well televised abilities that if you ignore them or don't learn them, you will die, and if enough of you die, you will wipe. And if they take these very simple ideas going into Gnomeregan and beyond, we should be in for some good times, as long as they don't fuck it up by making things too complex when we haven't really got the toolkit to handle it. And I'm not really going to touch on loot, it's basically just some amped up dungeon blues with the exception of a couple of epics. Now, epics are something I really didn't want them to just spit at us because Classic still has a degree of reverence for a purple. But the ones they did give us are weapons, and that is a decent slot to make epic, and they are pretty rare. In all the runs I've done, I've only seen a single epic, and it was the two-handed sword from Akumai. That's it. There are also some crafted epics that you can make. Now, these also needed to be balanced because, again, it's an epic, and in regards to acquisition, I haven't made one myself, as the only character I have with a profession able to craft one is my priest, and I'm not really playing him at the minute. But a friend of mine whipped up his and made it very clear it was an expensive pain in the arse, which I'm all for. It's an epic, and therefore shouldn't cost 37 pence and the bit of lint you found in your belly button. And that's pretty much it for Season of Discovery right now. Those are the only real notable things to talk about at this stage. Runes are the big thing and will continue to be the big thing going forward, and they have the potential to turn each and every class into a ball of fiery murder. So as long as they are clever with the design and slot placement going forward, we should be grand. They have, however, seemingly killed any form of challenge in the open world, because unless I pull way too much and have no mana and half health, or all the mobs are a few levels higher than me, I'm not likely to lose a fight, which I will admit is part of the draw of Classic for me, the open world being a threat. But it is the trade-off for getting these abilities, so it is a swings and roundabout situation. And other than that, the PvP zone is a bit of a lame duck, as I said, and could have been designed with actual PvP in mind, and not just an attempt to crowbar a really crap Warfront into Classic. And the new raid is just a pretty solid inclusion. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier is that it's not a 7-day lockout. You can actually do it a couple times a week. It's a Zul'Gurub style raid, and that's pretty neat. And I do have some concerns long term for this, and I have said this before because it's a season. I'm very wary of getting properly invested in a version of the game I know will probably be deleted in a year and a half. If, however, this is what Blizzard deem to be Classic Plus, and this is just the beginning, it could be great, but I know a fair number of people who I play with are wary to dip their toes in because Season of Mastery was a thing. They played that only for their progress to essentially be eradicated when the server shut down. I, and again, many of the people I play with, like investing in our characters, and starting from level 1 for the 5th, 6th time is starting to wear thin. MMOs are about time investment and growing your character and your skills, not being reset under the banner of seasonal gameplay like your average FPS or Battle Royale game. But if they take the lessons from Season Discovery and make a proper dedicated Classic Plus in a year or so, be that a fresh thing or post-kata for the current progression servers, and this just turns out to be the most convoluted beta, yeah, I could live with that. Only time will tell, of course, but for now, Season of Discovery is pretty decent in its own right. And because the time investment isn't all that high yet, I'd recommend just giving it a quick go if you're on the fence. Because even if you only get level 20, you'll have seen most of what you need to see for you to know whether or not it's for you. Anyway, that's me for now. Thank you for your patience with me actually getting something out this month, and assuming this goes up on the Saturday when I want it to, I should also be streaming, so please drop in, say hello. It's been bloody good fun thus far, and I'd love to have a few more of you come down and join us. I'm always down for a natter, and believe me when I say I can talk for England. Let me know your own thoughts down below. If you'd be so kind to like, sub, and share with your pals, that'd be grand. Have a good one, folks. Bye for now.